It is a great pleasure to have today here at RISM Henri Berestycki and Cristiana de Filippis. This happens on the occasion of Louis Nirenberg 100th anniversary. And so the first question goes to Henri. Louis was a great man, not just a great mathematician. And one of the aspects that made Louis so great was also mentoring young generations. So you were among the ones who was a collaborator, young collaborator of Louis. So how important is, in your opinion, and what is the the leading figure of a senior during the early research time of a young researcher?
Yes, so of course, Louis Nirenberg was an extraordinary mentor in a generalized sense. That is, it's not only the students, not only maybe the postdocs, but even to colleagues or to people who worked with him. And I had great fortune to work with him we wrote several papers together, but I learned a lot from him. I think it was all his approach to mathematics. It was this whole approach from which I could learn a lot. It was, for instance, he had ways to address problems. For instance, I remember he said, if you want to prove a certain property, you first go with the enemy. You try to find a counterexample. And you try, and if you find a counterexample, then you have solved it. And if you don't find a counterexample, then eventually you understand why the result is true, then you can prove it. So he had a whole philosophy about how to approach mathematics, how to approach research. He was, of course, extremely inventive. But all this, I think, he was an extremely deep mathematician, but the reason why he could convey it so much to others, to students, postdocs, fellows, and so on, was a lot related to his human qualities. He had this extraordinary enthusiastic approach to mathematics, very human. In fact, working with him was a delightful experience, not only for the mathematics, but because we could talk about so many different things. You know, when all of a sudden we were short of ideas, he'd say, oh, let's go and have coffee, let's go and see an exhibition, let's go and have a cheesecake. And then, you would go, but you would come back, and then all of a sudden you realize that he had all kinds of ideas. Then we start again. So it had a lot to do with his human qualities, I think. So in fact, this communication and this alliance in his case of very deep mathematician, someone with extremely brilliant, innovative ideas, depth in mathematics, but also his human qualities made it so that he was a great person to learn from.
He's still an example for all of us.
He's definitely an example for all of us. I think, of course, as a mathematician, as a teacher, as a researcher, but also by his human qualities. For instance, one of the things you mentioned, one of the things that characterized him is how welcome and respectful he was towards young people, students. I remember when I first met him, I was a student, and I felt immediately accepted and esteemed by him. We had such a warm welcome that made you really feel at ease. Not like you're a student, you're no one. No. So this we have to learn from him. There's certainly a good example for all of us to be very pay attention to young people and to welcome them.
Henri, you were talking about young researchers, and so we have the pleasure to have Cristiana, who is a young researcher, but already, established, and she received important recognitions like the European Mathematical Society Prize. And so the first question for you, Cristiana, is about very young people, very young student who looks at mathematics as a possible follow-up of their studies. So make a spot to convince them to study mathematics and to enter the research world and say what is so beautiful, what was for you the motivation to enter this field with this already great success?
Well, let's say that from my point of view, this is rather an easy spot because mathematics is essentially very democratic in the sense that it is shape to do. You just need to have ideas and a piece of paper. That's it. You do not need heavy machineries. You do not need to have a lab. You just need to focus and work on ideas and, of course, to study. And this is, in a sense, the art part. However, it is extremely rewarding in the sense that you can really appreciate, you can really measure your contribution to the progress of the subject in several directions, even if, of course, at the beginning, in the majority of the situations, it is a little bit step forward, but then you realize that, I mean, even in these in small observations, then you can increase and increase your contribution towards some important result. And point of mathematics is that sometimes it, in a sense, encourages laziness. Meaning, instead of immediately run through all possible special situations, in general, it encourages to look at the great picture and to really, really understand the phenomenon. So it encourages you to stop and think, which is a little bit, counterintuitive if you think to how fast we are supposed to go, how fast we are supposed to run. So the idea is stop, think, understand what is the real phenomenon behind what you want to prove, what you want to study, and then try to follow the approach which is natural and goes along well with the phenomenon you're examining.
Henri, we live in a complex world. So recently, the dynamic going around in the world, in the politics and the social behavior is really complex. And people look like they lost the moral teaching of the Nash equilibrium, which we explain to non-specialists as the fact that several group of people, in order to improve their condition, necessarily have to join. And so now we hear about a lot of separating, behaviors. So what is and what can or should be the help of the man of science with this respect?
Well, first of all, I think the people of science, persons of science, are citizens in general, and as such are stakeholders in general debate. In fact, one can see in the United States right now there are very worrying signs about funding for scientific agencies, for institutions. So I think this is really part of the debate, and as such also stakeholders. But your question goes beyond that, of course, and you ask me whether mathematics can contribute to understanding things which could be useful for the public debate, and I'm convinced of that. I'm convinced that mathematical models are helpful to understand how society works. I mean, aspects, of course, are not how all society works, but certain particular aspects, and definitely is helpful to do that. So, for instance, for the public debate, now many people who are working in complex systems, which gather people coming from different backgrounds, maybe it mathematics, physics, biology, or even social science. There are models of opinion dynamics, and certain of these models incorporate effects where you can see how certain polarization phenomena can take place, and you can identify certain aspects or certain roots of what this polarization is about, or how information is disseminated, how fake information is disseminated. So I believe we are at the beginning of that. In some sense, mathematical modeling, social science, which I think is a great future, great boundary in some sense for mathematics, a great frontier, I want to say, for mathematics, is really we are at the beginning of a new phase in this, and I think it will be very important for the public debate. Yes, I really think so.
If I may, you pointed out the war in science from the US coming on, but their main point of strength seems to be this technological heritage that they have. this important, they're master in the market of technology. So this should highlight the importance of investing in science, investing in basic research.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
And Cristiana, in spite of the lack of this equilibrium, say, it looks like is consolidated today the equilibrium in the gender equilibrium, no? So what do you think about this, say, representative problem inside mathematics? No, you are one of the few, say, mathematician who has an international visibility, and how can we act to improve this?
So in terms of gender balance?
Yes, gender balance.
Well, my feeling is that gender balance, as well as like a prominent problem in Italy is the run of brains, the escape of brains. They're all phases of the same medal, which is we are not investing enough into science, into basic research, meaning that you do not have enough economical strength in these fields to allow people to create a small research group, to have also some basic help in carrying on their research, aside from their collaborators, but also the possibility of having a group of young people, of postdocs, might help transversally. It's not about a matter of gender in this case. It's something that affects both men and women, the impossibility of carrying out their research with a strong support from the state. So my feeling is that it is again a matter of how much are you investing, how much you are supporting research. If you support research in a sufficient way, then you'll see that all these issues, gender gap, brain escape, will immediately, if not disappear, because it is impossible that it disappears, but for sure it will smooth out.
Thank you very much to Cristiana, de Filippis, and to Henri Berestycki. This is RISM channel.